of IT and application for modernization with Google Anthos. My name is Marla, and I'd like to welcome you, give a warm and special welcome to everyone. Please join me in thanking our sponsors. Our diamond sponsor is Cincinnati State, gold sponsor is Cadre, Checkpoint, and UCTA, and to our annual partners that we couldn't do this without you, ATC, Affidence, CareSource, Cincinnati Bell, Google, Round Tower, University of Dayton, Wright State University, and Uptime. So we want to get started. I want to introduce Andy Lawrence, is a Google customer engineer. He previously worked at the Kroger Company as part of the enterprise cloud team, where he spent time both GCP and Azure. He has a background as a software developer, architect, and operations guy across a variety of industries, healthcare, insurance, and retail. Beyond the clouds, you'll find him trying to keep up with his family of 6 busy flying RC planes, riding horses, working with scouts, or playing and watching baseball. Brant Comstock has been working in the IT industry for nearly 30 years, from mainframe and punch cards to current cloud technology. Brant is currently a Google customer engineer and has been an enterprise infrastructure and cloud architect with a variety of Fortune 25 companies, including IBM, Microsoft, Google, and General Electric. Brant holds an MS in predictive analytics from Northwestern University. Please welcome Andy Lawrence and Brant Comstock, Google, as they discuss application modernization with Google Anthos. Guys, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. The fact that this is the 14th year and you guys haven't let the whole COVID pandemic prevent you from putting this on is impressive. So kudos to you all. So today, Brant and I are going to talk about modernizing with Anthos. And there are a number of subjects that we're going to cover inside of this that the goal is to help you understand what we mean by modernizing, what we think provides an incredible set of advantages to you, and describe those advantages not in terms of technology so much as in terms of business value to you instead. So you already heard about Brant and I. Yes, we both work for Google. Yes, we're both based in Cincinnati. So not everybody from Google is from the West Coast. Anyway, you heard enough about us, so I'm going to move right along. So our first section today, and we're going to split this in half, our first section today is what do we mean by app modernization? And so we'll cover a variety of topics here, and then I'm going to hand it over to Brant, and he's going to cover the second half of this, which is a little bit about Anthos specifically and the ecosystem that goes around it. And again, one of the incredible advantages that ecosystem provides. Brant, anything you think I should add before I get moving here?
No, I think you got it, Andy.
Great. So let's dive in. What is AppMod? Or at least what does Google mean by AppMod? And in a nutshell, really what we're trying to say here by application modernization is that we're trying to create new business value from your existing aging systems. And there are a variety of ways to do that, but that's the goal at the end of the day. At no point should when we talk about app modernization, should that be implied as move your technology stack because that's what the cool kids are doing or anything like that. This is always, always, always about business value, and you'll hear me repeat that over and over as we go through our slides. To deliver that value means to deliver software quickly, reliably, and safely. It is those 3 capabilities. Forget how for just a second. It's those 3 capabilities that are so key to being able to deliver that value. And if you think about the times we're living in right now, where folks are working more digitally than ever, that people are restricted from their normal movement patterns in terms of going to work or visiting stores or whatnot, the need for businesses to react to that and to react quickly, not in 2 years' time, in a couple of weeks, in a month, is incredibly valuable. For companies who can't make that switch and can't do that quickly enough, they're gonna miss out on the market opportunities, and they're gonna be behind forever from the future. So that agility is incredibly important. And of course, you have to be able to do that reliably and do that safely as well. When Google talks about application modernization, at one level, what they're talking about is this, moving from the stuff on the left to the stuff on the right. And I'll repeat here again that you do this because there's a clear line of sight to business value, that this is going to help you move in the market quicker. There's a key value to it. But all of these things are supporting ideas that help you actually deliver better and deliver more reliably. In particular, if you were to do nothing else, turning existing applications into, or frankly fronting them with a set of APIs is probably the single best thing you can do. There are lots of other things that we're going to cover here, and all of those things can also provide incredible value to you. But a very first step, think about your future as a set of APIs. Think about the company's data and the company's applications as a set of APIs to you. So what that does is that it immediately starts to turn legacy services into more flexible, more modern applications that new applications can easily benefit from where they couldn't before. It then allows you to start talking about, how do I scale that API independently? Because I've got this standard contract, if you will, and then I can start talking about, how do I scale this? Where do I run this? How do I do things differently? How do I build the pieces underneath it and keep things up moving at the same times? So there are lots and lots and lots of values to just starting with the concept of an API. We'll cover some other aspects of this in just a little bit. And Google believes, and I think the broad industry would agree, that the second best thing you can do is work to containerize your applications. Because just as the slide says, any app in any language, any library, any binary can fit inside that container. There's no reason why the container size itself has to be incredibly small. There are advantages to small, but there's no reason why it has to be small or a particular language, right? It does not at all mean that you have to rewrite all your applications in Golang or Node.js or whatever the newest language is. There's no reason for that. In fact, a lot of existing applications that run in enterprise could be, if not automatically, very easily put in a container and run the same way that they're run today. There are definitely cases where that can't be true. Things that are deeply embedded into Windows OS or mainframe apps, those kinds of things are going to require a little more effort, but there are also a lot of things that you can start with. And again, where you start depends on where you think you can get the business value from the quickest. So containerizing your things means agility from the outset, because the result is going to be immutable, and then I can make other choices about how I run or how many copies of this I run, and start to standardize the way I run my applications. So let me take a step back for a second, talk about why we think containers are so important. And this is a snapshot of what Google looks like on a day-to-day basis. And these numbers, I think, are A, out of date. They're probably a year old or so, but B, encompass all of Google. So that's search, and that's the ad side of the business, and that's cloud, and that's Android, and that's all the things. And imagine moving at this scale and being able to, and having to go through a review process before you put stuff out, or an owner's review process, if you will. It just doesn't work. Frankly, imagine having to deal with 2+ petabytes of build outputs every day. What do you do with all that? And of course, specific to containers, Google runs everything in a container, everything. And as a result, that means both production and non-production instances. That means that we launch, on average, about 4 billion containers every week. And I don't know what the actual current numbers are, but I would bet that the 4 billion is actually a little low these days as well. The thing about containers is that immutable and standard artifact that I can then run in a variety of areas and move when I need to, coupled with some other capabilities we'll talk about here, it provides incredible agility. Incredible agility. And so whether or not you're at Google scale, you can be 1,000 times smaller than Google and still produce incredible value by working in these ways. And do that without all the presumed overhead that comes with having these containers as well. So with containers and with the idea of APIs, the goal is a couple of things. The results ought to always be in these 4 boxes. You're looking to increase velocity. You're looking to increase simplicity. Again, standardized container, it's immutable. That lends to the simple case. You want to increase that elasticity, whether that's scaling up or scaling down. And you want to be able to do that cheaply and quickly. And you want to be able to do all of those things while reducing risk. And risk, of course, goes in a lot of directions, but primarily the kinds of risk we're talking about here are risk to disrupting your users or disrupting your business in some significant way. We'll talk a little more about it as we go, but this is also to say risk is not to be avoided at all costs. Some risk is acceptable. And so how you deal and how you repair when those risks come true is key to success. And further, those same 4 qualities need to cut across the ecosystem here. And yes, there's more than these 4 columns that you typically will find in an IT division in a company, but I want to point out that I do mean this well beyond the application tier. I do mean this very much for the network tier. They need to be able to provide for that elasticity and not have an incredibly large lead time about this. They need to provide for the simplicity. The data needs to be simple and accessible, and all of those kinds of dimensions have to be dealt with across the IT landscape. All right, so if I focus back on the application side of the business here, I'm sorry about the phone ringing in the background. This is my half-hearted attempt at a joke here. There are many modernization strategies that depend on redoing something. Of course, this is the sun god Ra, and again, the sun god and the creation god from ancient Egyptian times. But I thought it was an interesting relationship in that while I'm busy trying to make a joke, a lot of the modernization strategies are shining light on your applications, existing applications. They are trying to create new value out of the existing that's there, and it is a start to help a company go forward, especially in trying times like what we're currently in. So there are lots of re's, and I'm not going to cover every one of these, especially not cover them in depth, but they are meant as a cycle. And whether you want to think of application modernization on individual app spaces or on a across my IT landscape basis, you can do some or all of these things, and the answer might change depending on what phase you're in. It might be that you want to rehost stuff, just move it from one host to another. It might be that turns out not to work well, or maybe that's enough value for you at first, and then something else like a re-architecting of things makes more sense in the future, because you're now moving in the mentality of how do I increase business value, which means that you have the business intricately involved, that they're championing for you, and you are driving towards them, not just doing because that's what you're doing. All right, I got all these re's. Where do I start? So a couple of things. Remember, business value at all times, business value to do the work and just not because things are cool. And remember that wherever you start, you want to start with narrow and small or singularly focused even sections of an existing application. We're gonna talk a little bit about how to break down an existing monolithic application. And it could apply to a lot of things, but break down an existing monolithic application and how you would go about that. The most common way you'll see people talk about and makes the most sense over time is what's known as the strangler pattern. And it's strangling the monolith in that you are slowly wrapping it with a set of new services where you have essentially refactored, maybe at the same time rewritten, maybe not, but refactored at least, existing pieces of functionality out of that monolithic, slowly making it smaller and smaller and smaller until it's completely decomposed into just a set of services. Now, I want to correct what I just said there just slightly. This diagram would imply that as time moves forward, your destination will ultimately be only a pile of services. I want to stress again, if it doesn't make business sense to do all of that, don't do all of that. There's no reason why you can't get to partway there and decide that that's good enough. Make smart choices. This isn't a religious exercise. This is very much a deliver value kind of exercise. But generally the pattern is strangle that monolith, make it smaller over time. And there are a variety of ways to decide where to start inside of that. The first is, if those 12 blocks on the right are my monolith, maybe I just need a new feature. Instead of adding that feature to the monolith, I add that feature as a separate service, and then I teach the monolith to call my service instead. And then as as features grow or as more features are added, I end up with more boxes. That's fine. Maybe that's what makes sense. Maybe what makes sense is that you have existing features and you need to break those out. There are discrete things that you could put out in a separate service, especially if there are additional applications or functionalities that you have across your IT landscape that require that existing feature somehow. Those are excellent candidates to break out. Fine. Maybe one of those particular features gets a lot more traffic than another, and you want that ability to be elastic, to be able to scale up and down. But scaling up 12 boxes is a very different story than scaling up one of these boxes. And so maybe it makes very good sense to pull that yellow box out, teach it to be a separate service, teach the existing monolith to call that thing, much like in the first version of this, but then it can scale independent of the other pieces. That's fine. Maybe that same yellow box isn't that it's got to scale. Maybe it's a real troublesome child, if you will, and it crashes more frequently or requires more maintenance. Maybe it needs to be worked on more heavily, but separating that out into a service and iterating on it then increases the stability of the other 11 boxes that are remaining, because I'm now only dealing with the one that's outside of it. Finally, maybe I've got a couple of pieces in my monolithic app that are performance hotspots. This might be a scaling problem again. This might just be something that needs to be rewritten because it's a performance problem. But the majority of the resource consumption is being done by a couple of things, and that way you can move those off to another area and not starve the remaining 10 boxes that are here for resources so that it can continue to do its job as well. So anecdotally, I've found that when I start down the journey of pulling out poor performing pieces like this, I learn a lot about what to fix. As part of extracting it, I learn about what needs to be fixed. This is a very good thing, but I want to caution anybody trying to do this that don't fix it just yet. Get it moved, get it outside, get that working, and then apply those fixes that you saw. And the reason to do that, again, is to cut down on the risk of overall breaking the system at the same time. Stepwise at a time, always making better iterations. And so once I get an application down the path of breaking those pieces out, the next thing I really want to think about is decoupling that application from its infrastructure. In other words, moving away from being beholden to a very specific virtual machine or being tied to any particular set of hardware, because that allows the operations team to do what they need to do to keep things running, and allows you to spend less time worrying about what host names are and how things are working together, and more time on figuring out how the app works instead. So that decoupling is really Really important. And the second aspect of that is once you decouple, that allows for systems that enable that decoupling to then be driven via configuration and version control themselves. No longer are they bespoke, boutique even sets of infrastructure that somebody has to understand and know about, and you have this domain knowledge that can't be replaced. It can all be written down. It can be in a configuration. Somebody else can learn from it, and assuming you actually apply it in an automated fashion, it can be trusted as a real source of truth about how applications are actually being supported by their infrastructure. Taking that a step further, if you have what Google calls a serverless environment, that makes the whole operations overhead aspect even easier. It doesn't mean the operations goes away. It just means that you're not dealing with the lower level stuff, and instead you can worry about about the higher level stuff. If you offload that stuff to a hyperscaler like Google, that means Google's doing that, and that also means that your precious resources, such as your employees, are spending time doing higher value things. No longer are they busy fiddling with routes or assigning permissions to things or making sure VMs are up and running. They can do higher order things which are more valuable to actually delivering business value versus just keeping the infrastructure running, so to speak. So headed towards the Anthos space, Google provides a series of serverless compute products. And this is actually only part of them. This is very much focused on where application level serverless code runs. But Google wants to talk about serverless across the board. We mean that for any product where you don't care about the infrastructure underneath. Give me your thing to run or your data to store, and we'll do it. You as a customer don't have to worry about the machines underneath or how much horsepower they have or anything like that. But anyway, this makes for a very nice flowchart about choosing options here. Anthos, going back real quick, Anthos sits in the middle of a lot of these things. There's ways in Anthos to use Cloud Run. There's ways in Anthos to run Cloud Functions. There's ways to do a number of things with Anthos. And it becomes can become this overarching modernization platform because it provides so many of those capabilities that you as an organization trying to modernize are going to need. It helps you break things down. It helps you separate responsibilities. It helps you run wherever you want to run, whether that's on Google's cloud, in your own data center, on some other cloud. It doesn't matter to Anthos. Yes, that's a real thing. Yes, we have very large customers today doing those kinds of, running those kinds of workloads across multiple clouds. It's a modernization technique that you won't find anywhere else. All right, so why containerize? Efficiency. Efficiency. The density of a container is always going to be greater than the density of virtual machines. And why offload that kind of stuff to Google? Well, that way we can be your experts at making sure that the infrastructure underneath is secure, is operating optimally, and allows you to focus on higher order things. All right, I covered this, but quickly, here's a diagram of it. Anthos, in a nutshell, can run in Google Cloud and pretty much anywhere else you want it to run. And that includes other existing Kubernetes clusters. If you run OpenShift, if you run EKS, if you run AKS, if you have built your own open source distribution of Kubernetes, all of that can be connected to Anthos. And then you can start to deliver your applications on top of all of those things. And you can also deliver a consistent set of security and policy and otherwise management across all those clusters for your entire organization. It's a incredible way to scale your operational resources.
Can I add one thing, Andy?
Of course.
I think it's critical to look at the lower left-hand corner. You run Google on-prem. Run Anthos on-prem to manage your multi-cloud environment. But Anthos itself is a response to organizations, seeing more and more organizations adopt hybrid cloud strategy. And this centralizes it through a single pane of glass for you to manage. And then the maturation of organizations in delivering applications through containers. But I think on-prem is critical, Andy.
It's critical. And especially for the customers that Brant and I work with, we're finding that none of them are really interested in moving 100% of their workload into the cloud for a variety of reasons, whether that's regulatory or simple comfort. They're not ready to move all those things into a public cloud somewhere. And so the on-prem case is really important. At the same time, you want to have that flexibility so that when you are ready, for whatever reason, are ready to move to a different place, maybe that's from the cloud back into on-prem or vice versa, that you can do that. And you can do that with ease, and you can do that with very low risk, unlike what you might find today when you're busy publishing just to some service in some cloud somewhere. That's not going to be the same as on-prem, and therefore introducing risk when you're moving between those environments. So just as Brant was saying, the upshot of Anthos is that you get a control plane, and it's an easy, consistent, and secure place to manage all that infrastructure for you. Those containers we talked about, all Anthos. And yes, in case you haven't picked up on this yet, Anthos underneath it is essentially Kubernetes, but it is that multi-cluster management aspect that makes it such a valuable proposition. I can run Kubernetes in a lot of ways, but being able to manage and know and feel comfortable knowing that I have all this stuff configured in the way I want it configured, and I have the right applications deployed to the right spots is an incredible value. All right. So with that, the last thing I want to point out here before I think I'm moving on to the second section here is that when we talk about modernization, one of the things Anthos brings to the table is that you can take an existing virtual machine and convert it into a container. This is different from the traditional path of you want to containerize. Well, that means you got to go immediately learn how to write a Docker file and what it means to take your application and put it in a container. And while that is not impossible to do and not difficult in many cases, there are cases where it can be difficult, or you're doing it at such a scale that you don't want to spend that time. And instead, Anthos provides a tool to migrate those VMs into containers for you, even if it's just as a starting point. Because once I have those containerized, I develop so many other capabilities to move and scale and be flexible with things that I just couldn't do before. Okay, so find your workloads, migrate, and then optimize, just as we're talking about. Today, that migration is optimized for Linux workloads. It's not impossible to do this for Windows workloads as well, but primarily, and because this is where the containers heritage primarily has been in the past, but it's primarily focused on Linux today. All right. So Brant, I think you're picking up from here. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, certainly. I can take off from here. Anthos config management. We're close to. We could just advance, Andy, because I'll cover Anthos config management in the Anthos ecosystem, right? Yep. So you can flip to the next slide then. So like Andy was saying, and thanks, Andy, I think you handled more the complexity of what app modernization means. But as Andy was saying, underneath the covers, Kubernetes is what's running on Anthos. and enabling, federated clusters, management of those clusters on different clouds and on-prem. But it's been GA since 2015, right? And it was open sourced and everybody's using that distribution. That's how you get EKS or AKS. And then, we feel that GKE, obviously, close to the source, is the gold standard for Kubernetes engine. Fully managed master nodes in GKE, auto repair, auto upgrade, auto scale, and Anthos GKE on GCP does everything standard GKE does, right? But also includes binary authorization, multi-cluster ingress, and a financially backed SLA. So we support this, and there is an SLA backing this service that's running for you. Go to the next slide. This is where, so when we talk about containerization, it's easy to do. So Docker was big. All developers loved Docker so they could test their applications locally. But then when you wanted to productionalize it and scale it, Docker Enterprise, for example, really wasn't up to snuff. So that's where Kubernetes came in. So you can orchestrate and automate and manage those containers and deploy them. But then, the question, the good problem that comes is if you're developing all these containers, is tracking them. You find you have, so let's go back to the strangler pattern where you're starting to decouple functions from a monolithic application and create microservices. You find you have hundreds, maybe thousands of containers that are running that make up these functions that are separate. That's where service mesh comes into play. So Anthos is delivered with its own service mesh, powered by Istio, which is open source service mesh, and it provides that service or container management, how the apps talk to one another, how they're networked, what's running, what's not. It gives you a view into the application and the current status of a service, for example. You'll get metrics and logging and tracing with Anthos Service Mesh. It provides some service identity, both in authorization and authentication and encryption, and it manages traffic by routing and load balancing communication within the cluster. Additionally, Anthos Service Mesh provides insights and recommendations along with its analytics. Essentially, a service mesh is an infrastructure layer that enables managed, observable, and secure communication across your services between your apps, right? Allowing you to create those robust apps that you can monitor that are made up of many microservices or containers. Supports MTLS, has its own certificate management, and then you can apply automation through policies to your clusters for the applications.
Grant, what's MTLS?
Mutual, mutual layer security. Yep. I'm missing the T. I'm blanking, Andy. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
But it's two-way. It's two-way authentication between the client and the server, right? So mutual TLS, transport security layer.
Certificate, yeah. Mutual authentication encryption. That's correct.
So you can flip to the next slide, Andy. Cloud Run, as Andy mentioned, so you can run serverless in your Anthos distribution. It's a fully managed serverless product compatible with Knative. It is running Knative. Just a few things about it. And this is really kind of a mature state for organizations, right, to run serverless. But imagine running it on your own Anthos distribution running on-prem and deploying those serverless functions to GCP, for example. Stateless containers, built-in domain handling, scales to 0, and Cloud Run scales to 0 on GCP or on Anthos. And Cloud Run for Anthos just enables serverless on your own cluster, wherever Anthos runs, right? And you can leverage serverless to manage events or orchestrate workload, things like that, as a starting point. Next slide, Andy. Cloud Build is our CI/CD pipeline or CI/CD tooling and service that's offered in GCP. Cloud Build for Anthos unlocks, your CI/CD experience and runs wherever Tecton and Anthos run. So wherever you've got Anthos deployed, whether it's in AWS or GCP or on-prem, you can instantiate your builds through Cloud Build for Anthos. Trigger builds on your source repo, obviously build, test, and deploy apps, just like maybe you're running Jenkins or you're running, who knows what your, sort of CI, executed as a series of containerized tasks. This one's important, Anthos Configuration Management, ACM. It automates policy and configurations at scale. So this is important if you've ever managed a Kubernetes cluster and managed all the rules that apply to those clusters, it becomes unwieldy. So you can centralize that configuration management through Anthos Config Management. Synchronize your configuration across the clusters so all the policies apply both on-prem and in the cloud. And you can continually enforce, there's continuous enforcement and emission control of compliance. So if you have you want to limit what space developers can get to, you apply a policy and have that transmitted to all your clusters, for example. It's based on Git. So it enables auditability, review, and continuous integration through policy as code. So that enables safe rollouts. And this used to be called Stackdriver, if those of you are familiar with that. But Cloud Operation is our operations suite enabling site reliability engineering practices. So Google kind of wrote the book on SRE. And what this does is it offers some pre-built dashboards. You can create your own dashboards. It logs and monitors all your services that are running in containers. It also supports tracing, profiling, and debugging of those applications that are running. It natively supports Kubernetes on GCP and elsewhere, on-prem, other clouds. And in Anthos, logging and monitoring is included, but not optional, but is optional. So if you had Dynatrace or Datadog or something, you could obviously observe and monitor your applications with those tools. But it seems like this is part of Anthos. It integrates deeply and throughout all your environment. I would run Cloud Operations. And then the next slide.
This one?
Andy. There we go. Andy had talked about APIs, right, as part of your journey into app modernization. Well, Google owns Apigee, and it's continually rated as one of the best API management platforms there is. Apigee Hybrid runs on Anthos. And in Apigee Hybrid on Anthos, the Edge Kubernetes cluster is managed by Anthos. So essentially, you can manage and deliver your APIs in this manner. The management plane is on GCP, but the runtime is on Edge Kubernetes cluster. You can read this, but this enables broader integrations through Google Cloud and offloads customers' Edge by internal Apigee services. Next slide, Andy. And before I really go into this one, because this is a relatively new one, but we just recently made an announcement regarding, and Andy, maybe you know a little bit more about this one, but Anthos Developer Sandbox. So anyone with a Google account can experience Anthos and all the developer tools that are part of that for free, and just see how to operate with Anthos. And how you would run an application with Cloud Code, for example, use Cloud Build. I thought that was a pretty good announcement we made for developers.
It used to be that you had to buy licenses before you could get started with it, and the sandbox takes away that restriction. So it is a fantastic way to get started with it.
Yeah, a great way to kick the tires. So I figured you knew something about that, Andy. But also, BigQuery is one of our most popular services, right? So typically centralizing a data warehouse in Google, you do it on BigQuery. But with BigQuery Omni, it's a flexible, fully managed multi-cloud analytics solution. So you can pull data. You're not pulling data from AWS or Azure or on-prem, but you can, from a centralized pane of glass, you can, and it's if you're familiar with BigQuery, you're running as if you're running BigQuery and issuing queries cross cloud. So you can query the data that's running on Redshift or something in AWS, or running on SQL, Azure SQL, for example, and you'll get your results back with the familiar BigQuery user interface. Next slide, Andy. And when we point this out, closer look at BigQuery Omni under the hood. I mean, basically, since we're talking about Anthos, it's powered by Anthos. I won't go into the technical details of instantiating BigQuery Omni. I mean, that could be a whole nother hour, but essentially you have BigQuery accounts on other clouds, powered by Anthos, and you issue queries to that set of data and get your return to the BigQuery UI or the Cloud Console, if you happen to be on it. And next slide, Andy. So just like all cloud providers, GCP Marketplace, for all things that run on GCP are supported and specifically written to run their best on GCP. There's a GCP Marketplace for Anthos, and you can find all your favorite packages there, provided by a variety of software providers, and just use them, deployable, ready to go to Anthos or to your Kubernetes clusters or wherever Anthos runs. And from a billing perspective, I'm really not going to go into that, but there's a single bill for GCP and third-party services, and those updates to those particular software packages are managed. And so it kind of takes the operational work out of running these particular packages. And I think next, Andy, would be the question and answers.
Yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy and Brant. So far, we don't have any questions. Just give everybody a last couple of moments here to see if they wanted to provide us some on chat.
I'll just chip in while we're waiting for any possible questions. One of the valuable things about that marketplace is not only can a wide ecosystem of third-party applications be built and then certified to run across Anthos, but Google itself is delivering some cloud services by way of Anthos, so that you can then run them in your own space, wherever that is, on-prem, on other cloud, whatever. So we think hybrid is here to stay. It is not a temporary state. It's not a transitional state on its way to full public cloud. We think it's here to stay, and we want to make sure that customers can use valuable tools wherever the right answers for them are.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. We're just very appreciative of your presentation. You guys did a great job. Your conversation centered around business value. I think that speaks to all of us. We just want to give a special thanks to Afidens, our featured sponsor for this session. To our attendees, we want to tell you to remember to complete the survey for this session by finding the link in My Agenda, Session Descriptions. It's the same place you click to join this session. By participating in the survey, you make your voice heard and are helping us shape the future of technology-first events. So thanks for taking time to do that. Now we'll take a 15-minute break. Use this time to grab a snack, visit the exhibitors. There's some great information out there, and just continue to explore the event platform. There are game codes you can earn by exploring the app, so go to the Event Game tab to learn more. And remember, the game code for attending this session is Anthos. That's ANTHOS. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.